The keys were colder than the wind outside Rebecca Marsh's office. Metal pressed into my palm while she stapled the last page and smiled like a closing credits freeze frame. Congratulations, Mr. Nelson. You're officially a property owner in Park County. I nodded, pocketed 40 years of overtime and packed lunches in the shape of 2 brass keys, and stepped into March air that smelled like dust and thawing earth. The cashier's check, $185,000, was already a ghost in my account. Solitude, however, felt gloriously solid. Highway 14 thinned the farther I drove. Pavement to gravel, gravel to dirt. Cell bars slipped. 4, 2, 1, none. A general store appeared like a last outpost. Coffee, bread, eggs, butter. The clerk asked if I was visiting. Living, I said. She nodded as if I'd just told her a secret people come to Wyoming to remember. The final climb tunneled under pine. Afternoon light shredded itself on the needles. Then the road exhaled into a clearing, and there it was. Weathered cedar logs, green metal roof, stone chimney leaning into the sky like it had things to say at night. 4 elk graze beyond the porch, indifferent monarchs of the meadow. I cut the engine and listened to absence. No elevators, no leaf blowers, no neighbor's TV crawling under drywall. Wind in treetops, a hawk circling high, handwriting loose cursive on thermals. Inside the cabin smelled like pine sap and old wood smoke. 1 room pretending to be 3, kitchenette, living, dining. A bedroom just large enough to argue with a double bed. A shower stall I'd have to slide into sideways. Perfect. Unloading became ritual. Hammer, wrenches, handsaw, each to the pegboard above the bench in rank and file. Books by subject on the shelf. History, engineering manuals, 3 novels I had promised myself for a decade. Coffee maker facing the window, ready to catch the first light like a solar panel for the soul. Intention in little things. Order, after years of everyone else's chaos. By the time I carried my mug to the porch, the elk had edged deeper into the clearing. A rocking chair I'd bought for this moment answered my weight with a single creak and settled. I called my daughter. "Gad!" Beulah's voice arrived bright. "Are you there? Did you get it?" Sign this morning, watching elk from my porch. "I'm so proud of you. 40 years." 40 years, I repeated, tasting it like a good coffee. I dreamed of mornings where I watched wildlife instead of brake lights. She talked about her students and her spring garden plan. I let the warmth of her pride move through me. When we hung up, the mountains were painting themselves orange and purple, like they'd done it every night since they were born. I stayed long after my coffee went cold. The phone rang again after dark. I didn't check the screen. I should have. "My parents lost their house," Cornelia said. No hello. Conference call voice, the kind that kills conversation before it begins. "They'll move in with you for a couple months until they find a place." The mug tapped the arm of the chair. A small sound, but it felt like a crack. "What?" I said. "Cornelius, I just bought this place. It's barely for a couple months until they find something. I bought this place to be alone. I spent my entire retirement on. Then you should have stayed in Denver." A breath like static. "Friday morning, I'll text their arrival time." The line died. I stared into the dark clearing. The elk had gone. Smart animals. Inside, I poured a second coffee I didn't want and set it next to a small green engineering pad, the kind of grid paper that had kept bridges upright and projects honest for 40 years. I wrote questions and boxes and lines, drew time frames, made lists. Not emotions, systems. Inputs, outputs, constraints. The keys sat like punctuation marks on the table. An hour earlier, they had meant freedom. Now they meant a new problem set. At some point, Dawn crawled through the kitchen window and found me still at the table. Cups circled the notepad like numbered exhibits at trial. My mind felt oddly rested, the way steel feels rested after a quench. Harder, clearer. I showered, dressed, loaded the truck, and drove back toward town. The ranger station's lobby was a museum of the place I'd bought into. Photos of wolves ghosting through snow, arrows on maps tracing elk migrations, paw prints cast in resin. The ranger who stepped from behind the desk looked like the weather had shaken his hand every day for 20 years. Help you? New to the county, I said. Bought off County Road 14. Want to be smart about wildlife. I've heard the wolves are back. Reintroduction's been successful. He tapped colored pins on a wall map. They're shy, mostly. Incredible noses. Smell dinner from miles out. Bears? Plenty. Rule 1, don't leave attractants if you don't want visitors. I nodded, soldier taking notes. Appreciate it. He handed me pamphlets. I asked a few more naive questions, mispronounced a trailhead on purpose, and left with the earnest aura of a sensible newcomer. I had the information I needed. The outdoor supply store had camo in every pattern Wyoming had imagined. Between the fishing lures and home security aisle sat the cameras, motion-activated, night vision, cellular. The clerk showed me 2 models that ranchers liked. Bear? Trespassers? He asked. Both, I said. Mostly want to know who's around. Cash felt cleaner than a card. Back at the cabin, I installed the cameras like I'd installed beams for half my career. Measure twice, fix once. One on the approach through the trees, low and tucked. One angle to catch the porch and any faces that forgot to hide their intentions. Signal flickered to a single bar, but held. I tested motion, walked the zone, checked the feeds on my phone. Satisfactory. Thursday, Cody's butcher paper crackled in my hands. 20 pounds of scraps, I'd said. For dogs. He didn't blink. $45 later, I carried 2 white-wrapped bundles through air already thick with blood and fat. Back at the clearing, I checked the wind the old way. Wet finger, west breeze, and set 3 piles 30 yards upwind of the cabin, far enough to keep the building dull, close enough to make the meadow interesting. This wasn't malice, this was instruction. Inside, I closed windows, dialed the thermostat down, unplugged what didn't need to hum. I stood in the small, quiet room I had known for 3 days, memorized it, then locked the door and headed for the old Denver house I hadn't sold yet. The drive is 5 hours if you know the roads and don't linger. I didn't. By midnight, my laptop sat on a card table in a holo living room, phone propped for the camera feeds. It felt like setting a watch on a sleeping patient and waiting for the numbers to change. Thursday at 10:03 a.m., a sedan rolled into frame on camera 1. The mic caught tires on gravel. A man and woman got out, Leonard and Grace, Cornelius's parents. He had a body that never liked work. She had a face that excelled at judgment. They looked around as if the mountains should apologize for existing without permission. "This is where he's living," Grace said, the vowels flattening the way only judgment can flatten them. "It smells like pine and dirt." "At least it's free," Leonard said, already moving toward the porch. "We'll stay a few months. Let Cornelius sort details." Grace stopped, noticed something beyond him. Her mouth opened, then closed. Leonard. Wolves. Camera 2 picked up motion. 3 shapes at the tree line, gray and tawny shadows stepping out of brush, moving low, ears pivoting. They angled toward the meat piles with the concentration of creatures that had been promised a hard winter and a better noon. They didn't look at the house. They didn't look at the car. They looked at what the wind told them. Food. Leonard turned the color of paper. "Get in the car! Get in the car now!" They ran, both of them, Grace stumbling, righting herself, Leonard fumbling and slamming the door nearly on his own coat. Gravel spat under tires. The sedan fishtailed, corrected, fled. The wolves, uninterested in human theater, reached the meat and ate in a choreography older than language. I watched in silence. When they finished, they melted back into the trees. The meadow accepted the secret again. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Business voice gone, Cornelius sounded like a man who had just touched a live wire. "What did you do?" I said, "Wildlife exists on my property." You assumed it wouldn't. "You baited them, you—" "Cornelius, Your parents are unharmed. They met the place I live, not a curated exhibit. If you wanted city rules, you should have kept me in Denver. You're insane. This isn't over. No, it's just beginning. When the call ended, I replayed the footage, not for satisfaction, not exactly, for confirmation. The plan had done what plans should, revealed truth without ruining anything that didn't deserve ruin. The cabin lived where wolves lived. Anyone staying would have to respect that. Anyone unwilling would have to leave. Simple. Evening brought the colder air Denver saves for reminders. I sat in my old kitchen with the green pad open, drew a line down the center of the page. Defense on one side, offense on the other. I had bought this place to be alone and discovered that solitude requires teeth. Quiet ones, legal ones, but teeth. On the porch outside, the mountains were outlines against a thinning sky. Somewhere up there, the cabin waited. I was done waiting. I started the list. Cameras in place, wildlife proof of concept documented. Next moves. Legal structure, evidence logs, controlled meetings on neutral ground. A lifetime of engineering had taught me that the best foundations are the ones no one notices until the storm hits, and the structure doesn't move. The pen felt good in my hand. The keys felt right in my pocket. I was ready.
The storm didn't come from the sky. It came through cell towers. By Saturday morning, my phone was already vibrating itself across the table. Texts, missed calls, the digital drumroll of a siege. Cornelius's message at the top. My parents will be there by noon. Make them feel welcome. I stared at it until the letters lost meaning. Then I silenced the phone and opened my notepad again. Yesterday's columns, defense and offense, waited patiently. I added a new heading, leverage. You can't fight sentiment with sentiment. You fight it with structure. Engineers know that. That Monday, Cody woke under a sky the color of cold steel. I drove into town with 2 missions, information and insurance. At the courthouse, the clerk's office smelled of paper and resignation. Property deed copy? She asked. Yes, ma'am, I said. I left with certified duplicates and the sound knowledge that my name, Raymond E. Nelson, was etched into legal permanence. No family discussion could overwrite ink. Next stop, the Cody Public Library. Free Wi-Fi and a quiet corner. I spent 3 hours reading Wyoming landlord-tenant codes and limited liability structures. If Leonard and Grace insisted on moving in, they would arrive not as guests, but as tenants, with rules, deposits, and timelines they could choke on. When I was done, I printed a short-term rental agreement. $1,200 per month. Due the first. Non-refundable. The phone rang that night. Dad, Beulah began carefully, Cornelius says you hung up on him. I ended the conversation, I corrected. He's just trying to help his parents. Help begins with consent, not command. A silence long enough for a whole childhood fit inside it. I know this is stressful, she said softly. Please don't make it worse. She hung up before I could answer. By Wednesday, word had spread through our small digital family tree. Cousin Linda called first. 3 years of no contact dissolved by gossip. Cornelius says you're not doing well out there, Ray? Living alone, setting traps, talking to wolves? I'm fine, Linda, but thank you for your concern. 2 more calls followed, each one wearing the same script, like a borrowed suit. Concerned tone, rehearsed pauses, closing question about my mental state. I began documenting each call. Date, time, summary. Evidence isn't paranoia, it's armor. Friday, noon. I waited in Cody's Grizzly Peak Cafe. Corner table, back to the wall, camera over the register within clear view. I scouted it the night before. Habit. Engineers don't enter unknown structures without load calculations. Leonard and Grace arrived precisely on time. They didn't order coffee. They didn't smile. Ray, Leonard said, lowering himself into the chair across from me, this foolishness has gone far enough. Grace leaned forward, clutching her handbag like a moral compass. Family is supposed to help family. You owe us a place to stay. I set the rental agreement on the table. 2 copies, neatly aligned. You'll have full use of the cabin for 6 months, I said evenly. $1,200 per month. Utilities included. Standard terms. Sign here. Grace's eyes widened. You're charging us rent? Market rate. Fair for the area. Leonard's face reddened until it matched the gingham tablecloth. You greedy old bastard. After all we've interrupted, what you've done is assumed ownership of something that isn't yours. I built my piece with 40 years of labor. You tried to requisition it with one phone call. Grace rose halfway from her chair. You'll regret this. Possibly, I said, standing as well, but not today. I left a $10 bill under my untouched mug, courtesy never costs as much as pride, and walked out. Behind me, I heard Leonard mutter something that ended with my name and a curse. Outside, wind scoured the street clean of sound. That night, the counterattack began in earnest. 6 calls in 4 hours, all variations of the same theme. Cornelia says you're not yourself out there. Grace mentioned you screamed about wolves. Maybe you need someone to check on you. By 8:30, even Beulah joined the chorus. You humiliated them in public, in a coffee shop. I offered them a legal agreement, I said quietly. You've changed. You're not the man I grew up with. The words hit harder than I'd admit. After the call, I sat at the kitchen table, phone screen still glowing like an accusation, the night outside pressed close against the window, and I could feel the shape of the trap tightening. Not theirs anymore, but mine. They weren't coming for the cabin. They were coming for credibility. If they could make me seem unstable, everything I owned became theirs by sympathy or by court order. Classic structural failure. Weaken the foundation, the rest collapses. I opened the laptop and started a new document titled Case Log Nelson.R.E. Dates, transcripts, screenshots, call summaries. Each accusation went in its own numbered section. At 9:47 p.m., I wrote the email that would change everything. To David Thornton, Attorney at Law. Subject: Consultation. Family pressure over property ownership. Mr. Thornton, I am a 67-year-old retiree living in Park County, Wyoming. I believe my son-in-law is attempting to coerce me into surrendering property purchased with my retirement savings. I require advice on asset protection, potential defamation, and estate control. Attached, preliminary notes. Regards, Raymond E. Nelson. I attached the evidence log and pressed send. The hum of the refrigerator sounded like applause from the only ally that didn't talk back. Outside, the wind had shifted east. Somewhere beyond the dark tree line, wolves would be crossing snow crust. Efficient, unseen, uninterested in human squabbles. I envied them their simplicity. I turned off the lights, locked the door, and sat in silence long enough to hear my heartbeat sync with the ticking of the wall clock. The siege had moved from instinct to strategy. Tomorrow, I'd start building walls no rumor could breach. Thornton answered my email at 7:15 a.m. like he'd been waiting for it. 2:00 today, his reply read. Bring everything. By noon, my paperwork rode shotgun in a leather portfolio. Deed copies, call logs, screenshots, the rental agreement Leonard had rejected, a printout of the wolf footage timestamps. I parked across from his office on Sheridan Avenue and watched foot traffic for 5 minutes. Old habit. Measure the load before you cross the span. David Thornton looked like a Wyoming ranch had borrowed a lawyer's suit. Mid-50s, weathered, no wasted words. He flipped through my documents the way a contractor flips through bids, weighing, testing, discarding anything that won't carry weight. He set down the last page. Mr. Nelson, you've done my job for me. Organization like this wins cases before they start. I built Regis. You don't eyeball a truss and hope. He nodded once. Here's their play. They'll try to paint you as incompetent or unstable, prelude to a conservatorship petition. If a court buys that, they freeze your assets while a guardian, likely someone friendly to your son-in-law, decides what's best. The smear calls, the concerned relatives, textbook groundwork. What breaks that frame? Evidence of competence and a structure they can't pry at. We'll form a revocable living trust, name an independent trustee, me if you'll have me, transfer title of the cabin and designate the trust as the beneficiary of your accounts. From that moment, family pressure becomes legally irrelevant. They can shout at you all day, they can't touch the assets. How soon? I'll draft tonight. We can sign within 2 weeks. Between now and then, I want a current medical evaluation, comprehensive, cognitive, and physical, on letterhead. When they call Adult Protective Services, and they will, that letter ends the conversation. Done. One more thing, he said, tapping a pen on my rental agreement. You were right to offer clear terms. Keep every engagement on neutral ground, never at your cabin, and record any aggressive interaction. We're not baiting them. We're documenting them. Understood. He slid a single page across the desk. Start this log. Time, date, claim, your response. If they lie, we prove it. If they threaten, we preserve it. Facts turn drama into paperwork. I left his office with the kind of clarity only good plans grant. Outside, the wind carried wood smoke and noon traffic. I walked to the public library instead of the truck. Back corner computer terminal, back to the wall. Habit again. County property records, civil filings, anything with Harrison or Cornelius attached. Most result pages were clean. One was not. Notice of default, Denver County, filed last month. 3 missed payments. I printed it with hands that did not shake and added it to my growing stack. 2 calls later, the picture sharpened. Thornton's paralegal rang first. Heads up, she said. I'm drafting the trust. We'll include a protective clause. Any inheritance for your daughter is contingent on her husband waiving claims. It keeps your generosity from becoming his bailout. The second call came from my daughter that evening. Her voice sounded thin, stretched. Dad, I'm sorry I yelled the other night. It's just, Cornelius has been under a lot of pressure. His parents... What kind of pressure? She hesitated. Leonard lost money. A lot. Online poker. 47,000. Over 6 months. The number landed like a bolt dropped on concrete. Loud, final. I probably shouldn't have said that.
You just did, I said gently. Has Cornelius told you anything about your mortgage? The mortgage? He pays it. Have you seen the statements? He handles them online. Why? No reason, I lied. Get some rest. After we hung up, I laid the Denver notice of default beside my log, the number $8,400 in arrears circled in red. A new line connected Leonard's $47,000 to Cornelius's missed payments to their sudden interest in my cabin. The diagram looked like a truss with a member about to fail. Morning brought purpose. I called Dr. Patricia Chen's clinic at opening. 67, retired engineer. I want a full medical evaluation, physical and cognitive, with a formal letter, preventative, not reactive. Most people don't ask for that unless something's wrong, the receptionist said. Something is, I said, but not with me. They fit me in that afternoon. Dr. Chen had quick eyes and the sturdy competence of someone who'd stitched ranch hands and delivered babies in the same week. She took my blood pressure, listened to lungs and heart, ran blood work, tested reflexes. Then came the mind. Draw a clock at 3:15. I drew it clean, numerals precisely spaced. Remember 3 words, apple, table, penny, and retrieve them 5 minutes later. Count backward from 100 by sevens. Engineers call it Tuesday. When we finished, she typed at her desk and printed on letterhead. Mr. Nelson is mentally competent, physically healthy, and fully capable of managing his own affairs. Patient is alert, oriented, cognitively intact. No signs of dementia, confusion, or diminished capacity. She stamped and signed it, handed me copies and the invoice. I paid by card and filed the receipt behind the letter before I reached the parking lot. 2 days later, my warning turned into a knock. A white sedan idled by the mailbox, and a woman with a tablet and a state badge walked up the path. "Mr. Nelson, I'm Margaret Willows, Adult Protective Services." "Of course," I said, opening the door wide so she could see the order before she stepped over it. "Coffee." "No, thank you. This is a welfare check based on a complaint." "I suspected as much," I said, handing her a folder before she asked. "Comprehensive medical evaluation from this week, bank statements, paid utilities, grocery receipts, and a copy of my trust draft. Also, a log of phone calls from relatives expressing synchronized concern." She scanned Dr. Chen's letter first, then took in the cabin. Dishes washed and shelved, bills in labeled folders, a pantry with fresh food and nothing expired, tools racked on the pegboard in grade school posture. "Do you have difficulty with daily tasks?" she asked. "I built a life out of lists. Cooking and paying bills are the easy ones." She smiled despite herself and walked room to room, tapping notes. At the door, she paused. "I can't tell you who filed the complaint, but I can tell you I've seen this pattern. Family disputes dressed as concern. If that's what this is, the case will close quickly." "It is," I said. When she left, the cabin felt warmer. Not because the temperature had changed, but because the structure had held under load. Paper shields, real teeth. That night, Thornton called with news his voice wore like a tool belt. "Public records search turned up a HELOC, home equity line, on your daughter's house 8 months ago. $35,000, single spouse authorization." "Ula didn't sign that." "Then you've solved motive. Gambling father drains 47, son plugs the hole with a secret lien. When he can't, he reaches for your cabin." I pictured my daughter at her kitchen table, grading homework in soft lamplight while an invisible debt gnawed at the joists under her feet. I set the phone down and stared at the cut of the mountains in the window glass. Then I called Thornton back. "I want the trust to say this. Bula inherits through the trust only if Cornelius waives any claim or if she divorces him. I won't fund his debts by proxy." "Understood," he said. "Expect pushback." "I'm not pushing, I'm bracing." The next morning, while I was repairing a loose porch rail, a familiar car ate the driveway in a spray of gravel. Cornelius climbed out before the engine fully stopped and came up the steps fast, jaw set, hands balled, a man who was run out of indirect routes. I took my phone from my breast pocket, turned the camera on, and held it where he could see the lens. "You're on my property," I said evenly. "I'm recording." "You set up some scam, a trust, to cut us out. You baited wolves. You turned my parents into targets." "The trust protects my assets. Your parents met wildlife in the wild. You tried to make my life your solution." "I'll contest it," he hissed. "I'll have you declared incompetent. I'll make sure you never see Bula again." "Say it again," and I did not raise my voice. "Into the camera." For a second, he realized what he'd done, that the mask had slipped, that the lens had eaten his threat and filed it under evidence. He pivoted, stormed back to his car, fishtailed down the drive, and vanished into trees that had no opinion of him. I uploaded the video to cloud storage before the dust settled and sent a copy to Thornton with the subject line, "Hostile confrontation, recorded." 3 days later, Margaret Willows returned my courtesy with a letter. Case closed, unfounded. Her report read like music. Competent, organized, no evidence of neglect. Complaint appears motivated by family property dispute. I 3-hole punched it and slid it into the binder behind Dr. Chen's letter. One beam, then another. The frame stiffened, the walls stopped creaking. That evening, under a sky that looked sanded and varnished, I laid the whole thing out on the table. Trust draft, medical letter, APS closure, notice of default, HELOC,
call logs, the wolf footage timestamps, and the porch confrontation videos still frame. Cornelius's mouth open around a threat he couldn't take back. I drew one final line on the green grid page and wrote 5 words in block letters at the bottom. Cornered animals attack. Prepare. The cabin breathed around me. Somewhere beyond the tree line, a wolf lifted its head to test the wind and then lowered it again, uninterested. The mountain kept its counsel. Tomorrow, I'd start building leverage.
The first rule of survival: when you can't outmuscle the storm, out-document it. By mid-July, my binders had become walls. Medical evaluation, APS closure, confrontation video, bank records. Thornton called these paper shields. I knew better. They were weapons. But weapons need leverage. It started with a discovery neither of us expected. Thornton's assistant called one morning, voice edged with surprise. "Mr. Nelson, I found something in public records. Mail is being sent to your cabin under Leonard and Grace's names." My coffee went cold before she finished. "What kind of mail?" "Wyoming Department of Family Services, First Mountain Credit Union, Social Security Administration." Identity theft. Fraud. Federal territory. I drove to the mailbox wearing gloves. 3 envelopes waited, all addressed to Leonard Harrison or Grace Harrison, County Road 14. I photographed everything: front, back, postmarks. Evidence bags from the hardware store held each one. Back inside the cabin, I called Thornton. "They're using my address," I said. "For state and federal benefits," he confirmed, already typing. "That's mail fraud and false residency. We'll forward it to the U.S. Attorney's Economic Crimes Division." What happens then? They investigate. If it sticks, we're talking restitution, probation, maybe prison, and their credibility evaporates overnight. I looked at the envelope stamped Social Security Administration. "Do it," I said. A week later, Thornton called again. "Ray, we just learned Cornelius and Beulah's mortgage is 3 months delinquent, $8,400 in arrears, foreclosure notice filed last week." I said nothing. The silence stretched. He continued. "That explains his desperation. He needed your cabin to bail them out. But there's a creative option." "Go on." "You can buy the defaulted debt through an LLC, quietly. The bank sells delinquent notes at a discount to collection companies. You'd become the creditor. Cornelius would never know who owns his loan." It was an elegant equation: control without confrontation. I walked outside, the sky burning red over the pines, and thought about the years I'd spent being reasonable. Being reasonable is how people like Cornelius learn where to push. "Do it," I said finally. "Call it Mountain Holdings, LLC." The transfer cost $31,000, money I'd saved for emergencies. This qualified. Within days, Cornelius received a bland form letter. "Your loan has been sold. Future payments should be directed to Mountain Holdings, LLC." He didn't know he now owed me. Weeks blurred into strategy. Cornelius and Beulah's Greif fraud investigation gained traction. The federal agent handling the case, James Morrison, called personally. "Mr. Nelson, we're proceeding with charges. Thank you for reporting this. Not many people document so thoroughly." "I was an engineer," I said. "We don't trust luck." He chuckled. "The evidence is airtight." That night, I wrote the phrase "airtight" in my notebook and underlined it twice. Late August, the air shifted. Aspen leaves yellowed early. I texted Beulah, "Honey, we need to talk. Can you come to the cabin this weekend? Just you. It's important." She replied 10 minutes later. "Cornelius is on a work trip. I'll come Saturday." Saturday arrived bright and brittle, the kind of morning that looks peaceful because it hasn't decided whether to break yet. I cleaned the cabin again, nervous habit, and prepared chicken salad sandwiches, her favorite since she was 6. The evidence folder waited on the table, edges aligned like soldiers before inspection.
Her sedan appeared at 11:30, dust trailing like a tail. She stepped out looking smaller than I remembered. Stress does that. We talked about safe things first. Her students, the weather, how the elk had returned to the clearing. But her eyes kept finding the folder. Finally, "Dad, what's going on?" "Your house," I said quietly. "It's in foreclosure." Her laugh was brittle. "That's not possible. Cornelius pays the mortgage." "He told you that. Here's what the bank says." I slid the notice of default across. Her face drained of color. "This can't. What's Mountain Holdings?" "That's me," I said. "I bought your debt before the bank sold your house out from under you." She stared at the paper as if it were written in fire. "You bought our mortgage? So you wouldn't lose your home, so he couldn't use it again." Her chair scraped backward. "This is insane. Why didn't you just tell me?" "Would you have believed me?" Tears welled, anger and disbelief mixing. "You think my husband is a criminal?" "I know he is," I said, sliding the next document across, the HELOC, $35,000 in his signature alone. "He forged this, used your house as collateral for his father's gambling debt." She shook her head. "No, he wouldn't." "He did." Then came the confrontation video, Cornelius's voice on speaker, the threat captured in pixels. "I'll make sure you never see Beulah again." Each piece of evidence landed like another stone in a collapsing bridge. By the time I finished, she wasn't arguing. She was crying, the kind of sound that comes from someone watching the life they built dissolve in daylight. "I didn't tell you sooner," I said softly, "because if I had, you'd think I was paranoid. Now you know the truth, and you have a choice." She looked up, eyes raw. "What choice?" "Stay with him, and you'll drown with his debt. Leave him, and I'll forgive the mortgage. The house will be yours, free and clear."
You're bribing me to divorce him? I'm offering you a life raft. She didn't answer, just whispered, "I need time." "You have a week," I said. "Federal agents will arrest his parents soon. Once that happens, everything goes public." She stood, gathered her bag. "I don't know who to trust anymore." "Trust the documents," I said. "They don't lie. People do." She left without looking back. 5 days later, Thornton called. "It's happening now. Federal agents arrested Leonard and Grace this morning. Fraud, mail tampering, benefits theft." An hour later, Beulah's number flashed on my screen. Her voice trembled. "Dad, Cornelius just got a call. His parents were arrested. Were you involved?" "I reported crimes. Nothing more." Long silence. "I need to call you back." When the line went dead, I sat on the porch watching the mountains shift color, wondering if justice always felt this much like loss. By evening, Cornelius called. His voice was hoarse, all polish stripped away. "You did this! You ruined my family!" "Your family ruined itself," I said. "You'll tell everyone what you are. I'll destroy you." "You already tried," I said, calm as still water. Then I hung up. Thornton arrived at the cabin an hour later, uninvited but welcome. He carried a small stack of papers, ready for the final phase. "Leverage," I said. "Exactly. Tomorrow, we present him with a simple offer. Total mortgage forgiveness if he signs divorce papers, property waivers, and a sworn statement admitting no claim to your estate. 3 days to decide. And if he refuses, we foreclose, legally, publicly." I looked past him to where dusk gathered between the pines, wondering if justice always felt this much like loss. The courier arrived at dawn, when light was still thin and the world hadn't decided whether to forgive or punish. An envelope with my letterhead, delivered by a man who wouldn't meet my eyes. Thornton opened it at the kitchen table and set the terms out like a blueprint. Full mortgage forgiveness, $43,400 total, $35,000 HELOC plus arrears, conditioned on 3 signatures: divorce papers with no asset claims, a sworn statement that Cornelius had no right to use my property or file complaints on my behalf, a legal waiver he would attest to under penalty of perjury. Thornton folded the pages back into the envelope, slid it across the table, and looked at me like a foreman measuring deflection in a beam. "You sure?" "I'm tired of war," I said. "This ends it one way or another." He nodded. He had already prepared the formal offer to be delivered through his firm. No extra drama, no theatrics. Efficiency is a kind of mercy. Cornelius got the letter 2 hours later. He called immediately, voice clipped with something like panic. "You expect me to sign this?" "You're welcome to refuse," I said. "We'll proceed legally. Given the default and my ownership of the note, foreclosure starts in 30 days. Silence where his words should have been. The hollowness of a man who has run out of safe options. "Give me 3 days," he said finally. 3 days felt too short and too long. It was an eternity made of paperwork. When he arrived at Thornton's office on the 3rd morning, he looked smaller than he had on my porch, less threat and more exhaustion, as if the fight had gone from performance to reality. Thornton described later how Cornelius signed with hands that trembled and a face that had been shaved clean of color. He just told Thornton quietly, "I needed money." "You gambled it away," Thornton answered without malice. "You used your wife's home as collateral without her signature. You threatened your father-in-law. You attempted to weaponize a family dispute for personal gain. These are facts." Cornelius nodded like a man taking a final tally. When the papers were done, when the last pen left the paper with a small final scratch, Thornton slid a deed across. "The house will be deeded to your wife free and clear once the divorce is final. You'll need to find other accommodation." Cornelius looked at the deed as if it had been a mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw the man behind the mask, the one who'd once loved and not schemed. He left without argument, not angry, but hollowed like driftwood. The federal case moved quickly. Leonard and Grace arrived in Cheyenne under a cold, late summer sky, faces smaller in federal custody than on my camera. The prosecutor's office had a stoic efficiency that made social media drama look like children's theater. They pleaded guilty to benefits fraud and mail tampering. The judge imposed restitution and supervised probation. 2 years, the judge said, to correct a grievous misuse of systems meant for the vulnerable. The sentence read like a ledger entry. Justice as arithmetic. I sat in the courtroom with a binder on my lap. The sound of the gavel was louder than I expected. Leonard glanced toward me once, eyes full of something like shame, and then looked away. No satisfaction in it. Satisfaction would have required joy. What I felt was closure. The case closed a loop. A family fractured under its own weight had consequences beyond our petty cruelties. Beulah called after the hearing. Her voice had an edge I recognized. Steadier, less brittle. "Dad," she said, "I did it. I signed the divorce. I left his clothes in a box at his door. I found a small place near you and Cody. It needs work, but—" "Good," I said. "We'll fix it together." We fixed it. We painted rooms, assembled secondhand furniture, hung curtains that made the windows feel like invitations instead of exits. We planned Sunday dinners because rituals are a kind of rehabilitation. When she cried, I listened. I didn't defend my long silence the way some men would. I explained the calculus, the fear that telling her without proof would let Cornelius gaslight her into thinking his lies were truth. She accepted and rejected the explanation in shifts. That was to be expected. The fall after the courtroom felt different here. The mountains were no longer a backdrop, they were witnesses.
Elk grazed in the clearing that September evening when we sat on matching rocking chairs. A herd like a slow procession took their time and moved through the meadow as if they understood what had been lost and found in human hearts. "Do you miss the life you left?" she asked once, watching a bull elk like a statue with muscle and patience. "I miss things I built. I also don't miss the part where I forgot to guard them." She reached for my hand, small and warm, and squeezed. The kind of trust that's rebuilt is deliberate. It's not the quick flowering of new romance. It's the slow graft of two trees sharing deep roots. There were practicalities that hung like laundry on the porch rail: restitution checks, probation requirements, bank notices, and the slow, bureaucratic settling of trust transfers. Thornton handled the filings, the trust was recorded, assets transferred, beneficiary designations changed so that my daughter would inherit through the trust, protected, conditional only in the way that protects her from predatory third parties. We had been careful, and in being careful, we had been kind. Cornelius moved into a small efficiency in a part of Denver that had fewer trees and more neon signage. He texted twice in the months after the divorce, one apology, one request, both unanswered. Mercy doesn't mean erasing wrongdoing. Sometimes mercy means allowing people to rebuild without your scaffolding. I didn't feel triumphant. Triumph tastes of vinegar. What I felt was close to what I had hoped for when I bought the cabin: space to breathe, now shaded by the knowledge that the air I breathed had cost more than money. It cost conviction. A few weeks later, Beulah stood on the porch at dusk and watched a hawk cut a slow circle. "Thank you," she said simply. "Not for money, not for the mortgage, for noticing, for fighting, for the slow work of putting things back together." We ate spaghetti that night at her small table. Cheap wine, cheap jokes, honest food. Laughter arrived in small, honest stitches. The wounds were still there. Scar tissue takes time, but they weren't raw in the way that destroys. When I lock the cabin now, the action is a small, contented thing, mechanical, not defensive. I walk to the porch and rock, the chair making its old collegiate creak. The sky opens, slowly washing out into stars. Elk visit on the edge of the clearing like quiet, appointed guests. People ask what it costs to protect what you love. The bills run long, legal and otherwise, but there's another cost. The thing you'd have to let happen if you didn't fight. I learned that the fight can look ugly up close and tender in memory. It can be strategic, not vindictive. It can be the right thing disguised in paperwork. The mountain does not need me to be moral. It only needs me to be honest about my boundaries. When the last court paper was filed and the final signature recorded, I sat on the porch and dialed my daughter's number. "Good night," I said when she picked up. "Good night," she answered. "See you Sunday." I smiled, shut the porch light, and let the quiet crowd in, like a good friend. If you liked this story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment with what time it is where you are now. And if you want the next story, click the box on the left. Thank you for watching.